Hi friends, Tiffany here. Welcome to my quilting life. Today we're going to make this quilt. So I decided in advance to make a sample for you guys to see what we're going to make. And if you want to make it, let's make it. So this quilt is called Weave It. I designed it up and it's super simple for beginners and it goes together pretty fast. So, well, I guess that's easy for me to say, but it does. It goes together super fast and all it takes is 2 charm packs and 1.5 yards of fabric. So this quilt has a 25 patch center piece and then it has weaving around the edge, which is really easy to make. So what we're going to do is we're going to build this in sections. It literally builds in a center section, these 4 corners, and then these pieces right here that run like a border. So we're going to go ahead and get this done. Again, it's just two charm packs and 1.5 yards of fabric, as well as 3 yards for the backing, which is really cute, as you can see. And then I will also show you in this video how to quilt it, as well as we're going to do the binding, which you notice is pieced. It has a nice piece binding, and that's with the same 2 charm packs that we're going to use. So let's get started. All right, so again, we're just going to need 2 charm packs, and this is Linen and Lawn by Sue Daily Designs. Very beautiful, and you'll see the most of this fabric when we put this together. And also I am using Age to Perfection by Maywood Studio, just 1.5 yards of that and the 2 charms, and we're going to have ourselves a nice beautiful quilt. So the center part is super simple. All we need to do is pull out our charm packs, and we need to choose 25 charms. So we're going to pull out 25 charms. So I'm just going to pull out pretty much 1 of every color from 1 of the packs. So there are my 25 center pieces, and we'll move those out of the way, and we're just going to lay this out as a 25 patch block. So however you want to lay it out, it's going to go 5 across by 5 down. So now all we have to do is sew this whole entire 25 patch block together. Now I will tell you it is super simple if you chain piece and or what I call oh my goodness, the word is not coming to me. I hate when that happens. Web piece, sorry. Okay, so we're gonna put this whole row on top of here, just like this. And we are going to sew this side, and then when we open them up, we'll sew this onto this, open it up, put this one on, open it up, put this one on. But I'm going to leave it on the machine the whole entire time. So let's go over to the sewing machine. So now we're at the sewing machine, and all we're going to do is take our blocks and sew them together with a 1/4 inch seam. So I'm just going to line them up, right sides together, and start sewing with a 1/4 inch seam, just like this. And then we're going to grab the next, and if you could see, I am kind of lining them up with the straight side. Half of it's pinked and half of it is not. Sew them through, grab the next, lining them up, And these are totally not perfect because they're charm pack and they have kinked edges. And we're just going to sew the next, and so on and so forth until they are all sewn together. And one more. Such a cute little pack of fabric. So instead of clipping them apart, I'm just going to leave them together, and I'm going to go ahead and press right, and then this one will go left, and then this one will go right, and the whole row that I attach will do that. And this one will go left, and then this one will go right, just like that. We're going to pull it back to the top, and we're going to start adding our next row. So again, I'm just going to go ahead and grab the pieces, and I'm going to line them up just like this, holding everything. And while I'm holding it, we're going to grab the next one. Now that everything is all connected and we have all these rows, we're just going to come here to the bottom, and we're going to put that bottom row on top, turn the whole entire thing to the side, and we're going to line those up. And we finger pressed all those seams to the opposite side. If you want to see more of this, you can refer to my 25 patch block series. I pretty much do this over and over again. So we're just going to go ahead and sew down these seams just like this. Nesting the seams along the way. They should line right up. And the last one, just like to nest them up just like this. My finger becomes the pin, and I sew on down, and then the first row and the second row are now connected. And I'm just going to go ahead for now and finger press these to the right, and we're going to go ahead and do the rest. Now that we have the whole thing put together, let's go press it. So now we're at the ironing board, and you can see I have it upside down and all of my seams are running opposite. What I'm going to do is, because I pressed everything one direction, I'm just going to give it a small little tug and kind of just pull everything nice and flat as I start from one end and make my way to the other, and try to just keep those seams the way I finger pressed them. Just a slight little tug at the top. Now that I know it's all flat from the back, we're going to turn it around just like this. Press it nice and flat now. So now we're going to lay our block right here, and it should be about 22 and 7/8, or about. 6/8, something like that. And it doesn't matter because the next step, if yours comes out 23 inches, technically they're supposed to, but yeah, if it comes out 23 inches, you're good. But if not, like mine did not come out fully that, it's 22 6/8, which is 3/4. We can still keep going. So let's keep going. What we're gonna do is set this aside. We're going to grab our yardage now. So we have 1.5 yards here. What we're going to do is open it up, and I'm going to keep mine folded in half because I can get 2 cuts at the same time. So we're going to line everything up. I'm going to put it on a line just like this. I'm going to make sure every single one of these is covering that line so that I can straighten this edge. So we're going to go ahead and grab a ruler, and I'm going to lay this right here on my 8-inch mark. Everything is straight up here, and it's touching on both sides, top and bottom. And we're going to go ahead and straighten it up just like this. We don't need that. Now we're going to cut 5 inches. So we're going to cut 4 5-inch strips off of here. So here's 2 already because I'm folded in half, and then we're going to line it back up on the 5 and cut again, just like this. And now we have 4 5-inch pieces, and for now we're just going to fold our yardage and move it out of the way, because what we're going to do is we're going to cut these right here, 2 of them, line them up. I'm opening them up, and I'm going to cut them at the same exact time. So I'm just lining them on top of each other. If you need to press because of the fold, go ahead and do that, but I'm not going to worry about it at this very moment. And I'm going to line this up. We'll move this out of the way. We're going to grab a different ruler. We're going to go ahead and cut the end off right here at the selvage. We're going to make sure that this stays lined up on a line, just like this. I'm going to come over here, cut the selvage off, because I don't need that. And I'm going to come over to 22 3/4 because that is where my top piece lined up. So 22 3/4, and now I just got 2 22 3/4 inch cuts, just like that. And we're going to sew them on to our 25 patch. So we're going to take this right here, and you're going to put it on one side right here, and on the other side right here, like this, on opposite sides. And we're going to go ahead and sew down both these sides. Now you can pin it in place for now because they're cut exact, or you can just do like me and don't bother with the pinning. It's up to you. We're at the machine. We're just going to line up this end. And sew it on. Again, you can pin it if you need. It's the exact size that it needs to be. And it's going to line up right here on this end, just like this. I'm also going to back stitch right there. We're going to turn the whole thing around because I have my other piece just sitting here waiting for me to sew it on. Lining it up. Line up the end. And back stitch. And now let's press it. So we're just going to lay this up here like this. And we're going to press it towards the border piece that we just added. Nice and flat. I do have some strings that I need to get rid of because sometimes that happens. It picks them up and gets them in the seam. It happens. All right, so here's one side all nice and pressed. And we're gonna come to the other side just like this. And you can even set your seam to where you heat it up and then roll it back. It's up to you. You can do however you wish. It is your quilt and it's on the inside, so who would ever know? All right. So now you should have a unit that looks like this, just like that. Top and bottom piece. So now we have a 31.5-inch unit. Technically it's supposed to be 32. Again, not everybody's 25 patch block is going to be exact because we all have different 1/4-inch seams. But we're just going to go ahead and take those remaining 2 pieces. Just move this out of the way. We're going to take those remaining 2 strips and we're going to cut those at 31.5 inches. So I'm going to take the 2, I'm going to line them up on the selvage, just like this. Get them all nice and flat all the way down. And we're going to cut the selvage off first, and we're going to come down and cut this at 31.5. So I'm going to come down to 31.5 like this. I'm not even sure you can see that in the frame. Probably not. And I'm going to cut it, and then we have this remaining unit. Go ahead and take that remaining unit and cut 4, there's 2 pieces here, so we're going to cut 4 5-inch squares. So there's 2. And here is 4, and then you'll have a piece that looks like this left. Just set it aside. So now we have 4 5-inch squares from this. We're going to set those aside because we're going to need them in the next step. So let's go ahead and sew now this piece that we just cut 31.5 onto. We're going to take this and lay this here. We're going to put this right sides together, lining up both ends just like this. And I'm going to sew down this, and we're going to add the next one to the bottom. So I'm just going to line it up. You could pin it in place if you need. We're just going to back stitch. I'm going to line the whole thing up. So, move my hands, adjust everything. We're going to grab the next one and we're going to put those right sides together, and I am going to back stitch right here and then sew on down. There we have it. Let's take this over and give it a press. Again, same with the pressing. You can either heat that seam up to press it back, or you can just do what I just did and just kind of roll it with your fingers. The iron takes care of the rest. Just like this. I'm going to flip the whole thing around, get the other side. And then I just kind of use my fingernails to push that seam, and the whole entire seam rolls back. we're going to leave it right here on the ironing board, and we're going to move on to the next step because, like I said, we're built in sections. So now we're going to build this unit right here in the corner. So we just got done building this unit right here with the 25 patch block, and now we're just going to build this unit right here, and we're going to do 4 of them. So now we need these 4 5-inch squares that we cut from that piece. This is going to make 4 units. So we're going to start by taking our charms, and we're going to take out 8 of them to start. It doesn't matter which 8, you can pick and choose. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. So there is 8 charms right there coming out. Ooh, I kind of like this one better. Let's throw that. As long as we have 8 of them, and we're going to take those 8 charms now, and we're going to line them up. I'm just going to stack them up because I've been making a big mess. I'm going to cut all 8 at the same exact time. So right here, I'm going to go ahead and line it up on the 2.5 inch mark. My ruler is 2.5. I'm lining the top and the bottom. And I'm going to go ahead and split these just like that into 2 piles of 2.5 by 5 inch pieces, 2.5 by 5. So we have all 8 of those. We're going to set those aside. Now we're going to go ahead and pull out 16 charms. We're going to go ahead and take 8 more so that we have a variety of color. Cut them into 4. I just want more variety since there was doubles in this pack. So I'm just cutting them into 2.5 inch squares, just like this. So here's more of a variety. So what we're going to do is we're going to take 8. 8. We're going to put it with 1 of these and 4 of these. 4, just like that. And then we're going to take 8 more. We're going to make 4 piles here. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 4 of these. And put it with the next, just like that. And we're going to repeat the process. Now take that piece that you had left over from your 23-inch cut. We're going to put it to the cut side. Line this up. And I am going to go ahead and cut a nice straight line here. Just so I have a starting line. And I'm going to go ahead and cut this is 2 pieces stacked, so I'm going to cut 2.5 inch. And then I'm going to turn it and cut 2.5 inch. And it's a 5-inch strip, so you should get 2.5 inches from it. And then you'll have 4 2.5-inch squares. Put 1 per pile. And then set this aside, just like that. And now we're going to go ahead and make the unit. So we're going to start with, now this is facing me, not you. We're going to start with, oh wait, hold on, we got 2 more cuts to make. Bring that back. We need to cut 2. Cut off of that same piece, I forgot. 2 for this pile. 4 sets of 2. 2.5 by 5 inch. Just like this. I almost forgot. All right, there we go. Now we have all the pieces. So we're going to start with a square. And we're going to put next to that these units. And then put our 2.5 by 5 of the background piece. Then we're going to put the 2.5 by 5 long pieces. Then we're just going to willy-nilly stick these all around here. We don't want the same 2 next to each other. Just like this. Put that one there. This one. That one. That one. There we go. And build it around. So we're going to build a unit that looks like this. So a 5 by 5 inch. A 2.5 by 5, a background 2.5 by 5, the charm 2.5 by 5, same on the opposite side, repeat that, and then you're going to take 8 of the 2.5 by 2.5 inch squares, building it around a 2.5 inch center square. So this is going to make our corner unit, and we're going to repeat the process 4 more times. So we're going to build this unit in rows. We're going to sew this row, then we're going to sew this row together, this row together, and then this row together. And I won't be able to show you all of that, so what we're going to do is just put you at the sewing machine and you can watch me sew these together in rows. Okay, we're going to start with the first row, which is my 5-inch square with my 2.5 by 5 inch charm. I'm going to start with that. And I'm going to go ahead and press that towards my background, just like this. So it's pressed towards the background. I'm going to grab the next piece, put that on. It's my background piece. I'm again going to press that towards the background. Then I'm going to grab my charm. Put that on. Again, pressing that towards my background, just like this. And there's the first unit. I'm going to put that back and grab the second. So the next is these 4 pieces, just like this. So I'm just going to go ahead and put all these together, right sides together, and sew them through. So this one I'm going to press towards my charm in the middle. Press towards the middle charm. And this one we're going to add and then press this towards the center. So it goes in, over, in, like this. So this one's going in, this one's going that way, and this one's going that way, this way, that way. Next row is the background and 2 charms, like this. So we're going to go ahead and put these together. So I'm going to press this towards the background fabric. And put this one on. Pressing towards the background fabric. And then add my last piece. Pressing towards my background fabric. Just like that. So there's this unit. And the last unit again is all charms and charm pieces that are the 2.5 by 5. So we're going to go ahead and assemble all these now. And this one's going to get pressed towards to my right, and then this one will get pressed towards my left, and then the last one will go towards my right. Just like that. Now to assemble the rows together into one solid thing. So I'm going to take the bottom and the next piece, we're going to put those right sides together. And since we nested the seams, they should match right up. We're going to go ahead and nest those seams. Stop in it, nest the next two. Stop in it, nest the next two. Lining the end up. And now you should have a unit that looks like this. And this is going to get pressed towards downward, towards me. Just finger pressing everything for now. And then we're going to grab the next row. We're going to stick that right here. And it's in the right spot. Again, the seams should all be going opposite directions. So I'm just going to nest the first two rows. Stop in the seam. Go to the next. Stop in the seam and go to the next. Stopping in the seam. And then when this one gets pressed back, this one is going to get pressed up towards up. And then we're going to put this last unit on. So this longer unit is now going to go on here. Just like this. Going to line it up. And we're going to put it on here. Making sure all of our seams are nesting and laying correctly, and they are. And then this one gets pressed down towards me. Just like that. And now I'm going to take this over to iron. Now we're going to go ahead and make this unit right here. So let's get all the pieces ready and make 4 of those units. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and pull from our pile again 16. just like that. We're going to take the ruler, 2.5-inch ruler, or any ruler with a 2.5-inch marking. We're going to line it up on here and cut in half once. Line it up on here again and cut in half once. So that is what we need. 16 of these are cut in half once, and we're going to go ahead and pull out 8 of them. So here's 8 of them, and then we'll just make 4 piles of 8. So we have 4 piles of 8 because we're making 4 units. And then we're going to take and make 4 piles of 14 with those 2.5-inch squares that we cut from the charms. So we're just what we're going to do is just start with one little pile for now. Sorry about that. You guys know I have a loud iron for those of you that have been around. What we're going to do now is we're going to take and build a unit that's a 2.5 by 2.5, a 2.5 by 5. Then we're going to take 2 of the 2.5 units and then put a 2.5 by 5. And then we're going to take 2 of these, just try to mix them up a little bit, and then 1 of these. I'm just going to move it down a little bit, and then 2 of these. Just like that. And then we're going to do the opposite. So we're going to do 1 and then 2 and then 1 of these and 2 of these and these and 2 of these and 1 of these. I'm going to move this there and this one back. There we go. So we're going to make units like this. 2.5-inch square, 2.5 by 5, 2 2.5-inch, 1 2 by 5, and just repeat it. Technically, it's the same thing both ways. So short, long, short, short, long, short, short, long, short, short, long, and then the next row will start long, short, short, long, short, short, long, short, short, long, and short. So we're going to go ahead and sew this row together and then sew this row together, and I'm going to repeat the same exact thing for all 4 sections. So to save you that one, I am just going to again put it in fast forward because it goes quicker. And now we're going to press the units that we have just created. So again, it goes long, short, short, long, short, short, long, short, short, long, short. And the opposite one is short, long, short, short, long, short, short, long, short, short, long, because they're going to be going in opposites. But we're going to go ahead, I just press them all with finger just to one side in every single one of these for now. I'm going to take them to the iron, but while that iron heats up, we're going to go ahead and take our yardage now. Back to the yardage. We're going to open it up. And mine is still folded in half, so I'm going to get 2 cuts each time. And it looks like they're still lined up really good, because that's what we want. We're going to go ahead now and cut 2.5-inch strips. So we want 4 2.5-inch strips. So here's going to be 2 for this cut. So we're going to line it up. We're going to be cutting 4 2.5-inch strips off of our yardage. So there's 2. And then we're going to get 4, just like that. So there's those. And then keep those aside. The next cut we're going to make is 4 5-inch strips. So we're going to cut 5-inch strips again. I'm going to lay this, oops, turn it around, Tiffany. Put it on the 5 and cut 4. Remember, I'm cutting 2 at a time when I do this. So I just need 1. And 2, just like that. And what we have left is enough to do the binding, because it's going to be pieced binding. Okay, so I'm just going to set that aside. Or it's wiggle room if you don't want to do the pieced binding. And we're going to go ahead and open, let's move these aside. We're going to open this up. And let's go ahead and press those other pieces. Okay, so these are nice and pressed. We're going to go ahead and cut these strips that are 2.5 inches by the width of fabric at this moment. I'm going to go ahead and cut the selvage off, and I'm going to cut them my amount that my outer side ended up. So if yours didn't end up 31.5 or 32 inches is what it was supposed to, if it didn't end up that from side to side on this unit, on both directions, go ahead and cut these to the size that this ended up from side to side. Mine is 31.5, and we'll make sure one more time. Yep, 31.5. We're going to go ahead and cut these now down at the 31.5 mark. So right here, just like that. So I have all 4 pieces at 31.5, and then the remaining pieces are for later. We'll use those. And then we're going to do the same with the 5-inch strips. All right, so there's that. And now we're going to make 4 units, and we're going to sew 4 units. That look like this. So for me, this is towards me. For you guys, there's towards you. Towards you, I'm going to put all 4 of these. Towards me, I'm going to put these, and then what we're going to do is we're going to take one of these units, and it's going to start like this with a small at one end and a long one at the other end. And then we're going to push this up against it right here. And then we're going to take the opposite one, long start on this side, short on this side. And you can see that it's hanging over quite a bit, about, I don't know, ½ an inch or so. What we're going to be doing is when we're done sewing these units, we're going to trim that off to size. So we're going to go ahead and make sure that all of these units don't have anything that's like directly on top of each other with colors. So I'm going to put my second one in here. And then we're going to put this one right here. And as I'm doing this, these two don't match, so that's good. And then we're going to put the third one here. And the third one here. So this is where I have 2 colors that look alike. I will just go ahead and grab this one instead. And now they are different, just like that. And then I'll put my 4th one right here and this one right here, making sure that no 2 colors are the same directly on top of each other. But it really doesn't matter. You don't have to be that perfect with it. So we're going to go ahead and take these 4 units and sew them from this top side right here all the way down, and then we're going to sew these 4 units from this side down this seam so that the small one lands with it on both of the units, and then we're going to trim those away, the excess, and then put the 2 units together. So let's go over to the sewing machine. Again, I'm going to be sewing like this. So I'm going to line these right sides together, and I'm going to sew down this whole seam right here, and then I will have a little bit left over on the end. Don't worry about that because it's going to get trimmed away. So I'm just going to put you guys in fast forward while I do this. While I was in fast forward, I totally spaced. On this end, we trimmed just a little bit off, which were those little end pieces. So I stopped and realized, oh, hey, let's just do it on these. So when they're on top of each other, just like this, you can see there's just a little bit hanging off. Go ahead and use your background piece as the template, which is your background color, and just snip that right off. It's being cut to size, just like that. So just go ahead and do that with every single piece, just the end that sticks over. I was totally getting ready to iron when I realized that I cut them off not on the camera. Alright, and one more. Cut them off, and some may hang over more than others, it just depends. So we're going to go ahead and lay these back like this so that you can see. Like this. We're going to be making the 2 together after I press it first. So this one will go there, and you can also make sure one more time that you have them in the correct spot, and I don't think that's the correct spot. So I'm just going to go ahead and press them, and then I'll lay them back out. That way I can lay them out correctly the way I had them. And we're always going to press this seam right here. On the smaller one, it's going to get pressed towards the background, and then when we connect the 2, it's going to get pressed towards the background, and then this top one gets pressed towards the background. So towards the background, towards the background, towards the background. So once they're pressed, again, this unit presses towards the background, this unit presses towards the background, and we're going to go ahead now and put these 2 units right sides together. And then when I press this, I will also press this towards the background. So I'm going to go ahead and sew all 4 of these units together, and we'll be right back. Now that we have all 4 of these units together, we also have all 4 of the corner units together, and we have our quilt top. What we're going to do now is assemble it. It's that quick. So what we're going to do is we're going to start by grabbing 2 of these. It doesn't matter which 2. We're going to move these out of the way for now. We're going to grab those 2, and we're going to grab this guy, and we're going to put 2 of these on here. So we're going to start by putting 1 on this side, and it should be exactly the right size. I know it doesn't look like it because of the position that we're in, but this one is going to go on this side, right sides together, just like this. And to keep this where I want it for now, we're going to go ahead and throw some pins in here. So I'm just going to go ahead and toss a couple pins in here, holding it in place so that way nothing moves when I go to turn this around and add the other side's piece. So we're just pinning a couple pins in here all the way across from one end to the other. They're exactly the size you need. Remember, if yours was 32 inches or 31.5 like mine, it matches exact because we made these units exactly that size. And we're going to go ahead, and while that sits there pinned on, we're going to grab this side. We're also going to put this right sides together. You want your color piece lining up on the background fabric, not background fabric to background fabric. So again, I'm just going to go ahead, add some pins in here, all the way from one side to the other, holding it in place. I totally pin differently than everyone because I don't pin very often. Maybe I should have my pins coming from one side only. All right, so now I'm going to go ahead and sew along this one, and as well as along this one, which decided to make a mess of itself as I threw it down. So we're going to sew down both those sides. Since it's only me in here and I don't have a pause and start button for you, we're just going to walk to the camera and sit down and do this. So again, I'm just going to start right here. I'm going to back stitch, and then I'm going to pull my pin out, and I'm just going to, they're exactly the right size, so I'm just going to sew on down. Right off, and what we're going to do is we're going to fold this back, and we're going to press this whole entire row towards the piece that we just added. So I'm just going to finger press it for now, so that way when I hold it up you can see it's going to look like this. And we're going to take this over to the iron and press that, and then I'll come right back with the next half. It's kind of getting a little long for my area. So what we're going to do is the next step, as as you can kind of see, hopefully within the frame, is we're going to take our next piece, and one is going to go on this side and one is going to go on the other. So we're going to build 2 units to go on the end. We're going to use the long one, and now it's time to start using these. So we're going to take one of these and one of these. We're going to put one on this side, and make sure that none of your colors line up, and you want the 5-inch square that we added out facing the outside. So I don't want that one there. But let's see if this one matches. Okay, that one looks good right there. So I'm going to attach one to this with the 5-inch square towards the top or towards this piece that you see. And I'm going to sew along this edge right here, and all these seams should now be opposite of each other. Okay, and then I'm going to take this one again and put this one on this side, and again the seams should be nesting opposites of each other. So we're going to go ahead and attach these 2, and I'm going to turn the whole thing around. Now that I know which side I want these on, I'm going to turn this whole entire thing around right now. We're going to see if these 2 look good. So we're going to put one here, and where did my other piece disappear to? I think that's what this is. Under here, we're going to grab this one and put this in the outside, and look, that looks good. Let's pick this up, scroll it over just a little, and look on this end. They do not match, which is good. And this one, I have no pieces that match either. So we're going to go ahead and sew this one to this side and this one to this side. Again, if you lay them right sides together like this, you can see that your 5-inch square is laying on top. Again, I'm just going to take you over to the machine. Again, it's just me, so makes it easier. We're just going to move it and leave you rolling instead of pausing it. We're going to put you right here. I'm just going to move that out of the way for a second, and that seam's going together and this seam is going together. They're nesting. They should nest because they're opposite facing. So again, I'm just going to line this up. I'm going to nest that first seam. I'm going to stop in it, grab the next seam, making sure that they are nested up, and the third seam. Everything is nice. And then I'm going to turn the whole thing around and sew the opposite side on. Again, second one, just making sure there's no gap between them. It kind of helps not to have the gap between them, so they nest a little bit better. And in case the, you know, depending on what side your seam is folded, in case the feed dogs try to pull one in more and then they cross over each other instead of butting up right next to each other perfectly, you don't want them to cross over in either direction, you know. So just hold them in place. Now both of these are on. So now we're going to go ahead and press these ones toward the long center part. So these are going to go towards the long center part. I'm going to flip this, and I'll take it to the iron before it. So I'm going to make sure that here's my long centerpiece. I'm going to just press the whole entire side that I just added towards that center, and I'm going to do it on both of them. Oops, get that turned the right direction. We're just going to do it on both, and then I'm going to take it to the iron real quick and just give it a little press. We're going to come to this other side real quick, and we're going to do this. And instead of pausing, you guys, I'm just going to go ahead and continue rolling. So I'm going to press this real quick. We'll just go over to the iron, just like right here. And again, they're pressed towards the long piece. And so here was the side we just added. We are going to now lay the pieces on here, making sure, again, because I don't remember which piece is what from moving them around, but we're going to make sure that that 5-inch squares and the 5-inch strip are facing outward like this. And since these two match, this is not the piece for this side. So we're going to grab this one, because I made sure that they weren't matching before I sewed them together. So those two go here, and let's check the other side. I know I'm wrinkling up my fabric as I do this, but we're gonna pin this on now because it's so long. We'll just do one side at a time. So we're gonna line this up right here. Again, all these seams now, every single one of the connecting seams should all be opposite of each other. So let's throw some pins in here, lining up my end right there. And then we're just gonna throw some pins in scattered throughout. And I'm just gonna kind of come to this side and throw a couple pins in, and then I'll pin the center. Again, all these seams should be nesting seams. They should all be pressed opposite of each other. So everything should line right up. Let's put a couple in this center section. If I can get it to stay nice and flat. All this wiggling and moving, nothing stays flat around here. And if you have to do it on the floor, do that on the floor. So I'm going to take this over to the machine now. I'm going to back stitch right here, sew along that side, and then back stitch. So again, instead of pausing, you guys, we're just going to turn the camera facing me, and I'm going to carefully, because it's getting heavier, we're just going to keep most of it on the table next to me. And I'm going to start this with a back stitch. And now I'm just going to make sure that my seams are nesting on the way down. Again, I'm just filling with my finger to make sure one is not slipped over the top again like this. You know, we want them to be perfectly like this instead of slipping over to the top. I tend to stitch, and now this side should be on, and we're going to be pressing this whole entire seam up away from the center, so that whole seam is just going to go up all the way down. And I'm going to go ahead and press it now, that way it's done, because this thing is getting bigger. And you're just going to stare at the blankness for a second and literally have one more seam to finish this off. So here's that top portion on there. It is pressed towards away from the center. And now we're just going to pick this up and add the opposite side. Like, this goes together so super fast, even in fast forward. So we're going to go ahead now and stick this on here. Again, we want these 5-inch squares and the background 5-inch strip right here to face outward. We're just going to go ahead and put this right sides together. And I'm not going to pin this because I've already taken too much of the time being, you know, in regular mode. Because I try to put things in fast forward, but I can't always keep going back and forth to the camera. It actually takes longer to record a video that way. Did you know that? So just get a one of my videos, I was making a video and I went like this and turned, and the whole thing of pins just went all over the place down here on the floor. It happens. It happens. It happens. I'm going to press this whole unit away from the center. So let's do that off camera, and then I will reveal the quilt top to you, and then we'll get to the next part, which is quilting. Wasn't that simple? It only took a few hours, and this is the final result, but not really, because we need to long arm quilt it. So grab yourself a little over 3 yards, probably like 3 1/4 yards of fabric, and I'm choosing this because it's blue and it's got little flowery polka dots on it, and I'm going to load this on the long arm, and we're going to quilt this real quick, and then I'm going to show you how to bind. So let's get to long arm quilting. Here I would show you guys real quick how to put the backing fabric together. So I'm just going to take everything off of here. This is 3 1/2 yards. I'm going to take the whole entire thing off of here, toss that to the side, and I'm just going to line these two ends up right here, just like this, and I am going to find the center right here. So here's my center. I'm just going to throw the rest of it off of the table. This is my center. I'm going to take my scissors and I'm just going to stick them right here, and I'm going to split this in half. So 3 1/2 yards will do, because it'll just give you tons of extra. And what we're going to do is these two right here, I'm going to grab the two centers because they're already right sides together, and I'm actually just going to stitch along here with about a 1/2 inch of a seam allowance, because this is on my back and I don't really very often cut away the selvage on here. I kind of just use it as my guide. So we're going to go ahead and sew the back together, and I'm just using the selvage as my guide for where my needle should land. I'm going to back stitch, and then I'm going to just grab this end right here, and I'm going to start running this through to make my backing fabric. So here now I have a whole entire solid piece, just like this. And it looks like I have a boo-boo in the fabric, but I'm going to leave that because I'm not worried. So what I'm going to do is just take this to the iron now, and I'm going to press this seam open all the way across. I prefer on the long arm on my personal quilts that I make to have a nice open seam. So I'm just going to take and press the seam open at the iron, and right now I don't even have the iron on, so I'm just showing you that we're going to press it open all the way down, and I will be right back at loading it on the long arm. Okay, so let's load this. I'm going to find my selvage. And I'm going to throw it up over there. Just like this. Straighten the whole thing out. I'm doing this with only one bar because I don't feel like putting the other one back up. So I'm just gonna nicely line it up where it lays flat along this whole entire thing. And I'm gonna use my red snapper system. I'm gonna attach. I do have a lot hanging over because I know I have room. This is a little bit extra batting or backing fabric that I need. Got my second one. So put it on. Rolling it towards me and flattening it out, keeping it nice and straight. My open seam that's going to run along here. And it's going to stay open when it tucks under here. Nice and flat all the way till it falls. And I'm just going to grab my top and grab two long pieces. And again, I don't feel like doing it any other way because I'm trying to make this quick. So I'm just going to lay these up here and I'm going to use my table to attach. I'm just going to make sure that this is nice and flat. I'm going to stick the first part on and I'm just going to hold this up here. Grab my second piece, put that on. Piece all the way over. Making sure that it's snapped on both sides all the way down. Roll it up, just like this. Snap it into place. You can see that it is nice and flat all the way across. There is no bowing or sagging. So now all I have to do is grab my batting and my quilt top and load it on. Quilt top on, it's basted down and ready to quilt. So all I'm going to do on this one is an all over meander at 10 stitches per inch in precision mode. And enjoy. Do is pull it off the frame, which is quite simple. As you can see, I did have plenty of extra. So I'm just gonna take this off. I'm gonna go ahead and pull the whole thing off. And there we have it. It's off the frame. Now we're going to trim the quilt. As you can see, I've had a bunch of hangover because, you know, 3.5 yards is too much. But I'm just going to trim the big part off first so that it stays in the full length that it is. And I'm going to use just this small ruler, and I'm going to use my tall 60-degree cutter because the Martelli blades with the puffy, you know, sometimes I just have this thing where I can't recall what things are called, and it's happening a lot the last couple days. Anyways, the fluffy batting actually gets stuck along this right here because it is really fluffy. So I just forego using any of the Martelli cutters when I am trimming a quilt, and I just go with a tall cutter because it's out of the way. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to line my ruler up. My first cut usually isn't the straightest, especially if a quilt shifts. But when you're trimming a quilt, just go with as straight as possible from the corner. This one is actually really straight, but some are not. And I lined the ruler up with the edge, and most of the time I cut off the longest or biggest area first to save that from being trimmed to the side or any other strange trimming way. And then I just spread it a little and then line up the ruler on the edge of the quilt and then trim, pull it away. I try to make sure that none of this is folding under or none of the excess over here is folding under. It's really good that it hangs over the table for me. Trim all the last of this excess off. So this nice big chunk, later I'll do this, obviously not on camera, but I always pull off any excess batting, whether it be the poly or cotton or poly cotton blends. And even when I'm doing my client quilts, I do the same exact procedure. I cut off the one side first, and then I fold it up and stick it aside. Because all the big cuts I save. If it's a really skinny, because the way I line things up on the long arm, if it's really skinny, I don't do that. So now I'm going to go ahead and turn the quilt. Again, I have another big side because I kind of lined the quilt up towards the top corner. So that way one whole side. But most people would center with their 4 inches all the way around. I kind of just, I try to save as much backing fabric in bulk as possible because I make my own pre-cuts mostly out of these fabrics. So I'm going to line this up nice and straight with this edge, nice and straight with this edge, make my cut, pull it away, adjust. It's not very big. With big quilts, it's the same thing. I just do this same procedure when the quilt is nice and large. It goes pretty quick either way. Again, all I do is pull all this excess off. And then I fold it up. Move it out of the way. And all this I save to stuff pillows. So we're going to turn it again. This is the part that was along the top, so you can see I screwed it up as much as I can. So the part that's off of this just gets trimmed up nice and straight, and it'll go into my strings. Yes, I trim my strings nice and straight. I don't know why I do that. It's just, I guess, a habit to have everything already straight and cut nice before use. So you can see this fluff would have gotten in the way of the rotary cutter. And again, I just pull this off, just like that. And I make 2 piles. Turn it for one last time. Straighten my line up right here with this. I noticed when I used a free motion quilt all the time that my quilts would shift quite a bit, even if I based sprayed them or anything. So that doesn't happen much on the long run. When I'm getting to the top, to the side that I already trimmed to keep everything nice and square, I just line the ruler up with the end. Once I'm finally complete with that, off, toss this aside, and I have some nice big pieces for my scrap bin and a nice square trimmed quilt. Now let's get to binding it. As you can see on the example quilt, the binding has the leftover charm squares right here, again along this bottom, along that top, and along that side. So they're mainly sitting along these sections right here, and in the corners, all four corners, it is lined up to where it's just the background color in those four corners. So let me show you how this works. What we're going to be doing is lining charm squares up to fit in this section right here, and then we're going to try to line up the background to go in this section here, and so on and so forth. To achieve that, here's all of our leftover pieces. Like I said, we're going to use every piece to this quilt. So we're going to grab all of this, and I'm going to pull this piece out from the bottom because that is the leftover from my yardage. And we're going to line this up right here on this side, because that was the last side that was cut. I'm going to go ahead and line that up. I'm going to grab a ruler and I'm going to cut this a 2.5 inch cut. And I doubt this is going to happen. Oh, it's so close. So I did not get 2.5 inches off of this. So I'm just going to randomly cut its closest number. So this can go in my stash of random size strips. So that's just going to get set aside. I have one of these. I have a bunch of these. There are also 2.5 inch squares left over as well. So what we're going to do is we're going to take this stack and we're going to go ahead and cut 2.5 inches. Use my sugar blade for this part. So I'm going to line this up on 2.5 inches, and there I have a bunch of rectangles, and this is how this is going to work. So we're going to take this strip to start with, and I am going to take my scissors and split it in half on the fold, just like that. And then I'm also going to cut the selvage away, just like that. And that part is now done, temporarily, because we're going to fit it to size. We're going to take all these, all this. Let's see if there is 2.5 left on this as well. Hopefully there is. Oh, no. Because it's eating into the selvage. We don't want that. So we're going to take one of these and we're going to cut 2 2.5 inch strips off of here. There's 1, and there's 2, because we need 2 for that. And then we're going to take the longer ones right here that are 2.5 inches. I knew they were in there somewhere. There should be 4 left of these. So I'm just gonna line them all up nicely. And I'm going to take the selvage off of all of them at the same time. Just like that. And we're going to start creating binding for this. That is scrappy. So we don't need any of these now. Just set those aside. We're going to take these two like this and those two like that, and we're going to put these right sides together, and we're going to sew a seam, just a nice straight seam across these at a 1/4 inch seam. So I'm just going to sew a 1/4 inch seam on that. I'm going to turn these two right sides together, also sewing a 1/4 inch seam. And now these two pieces are done. We're just going to press them to one side, flip it around, open that seam. We want open seams for this. And I don't have the iron on yet, so I'm just gonna, the reason why I pressed to one side first is that way it opened the seam all the way. That way there was no folds or pleats on the front. When I open the seam up the rest of the way, it should stay nice and flat. So I'm just gonna roll it. So these two pieces are now made, and we're going to start making a mess. So what we're gonna do, I'm gonna take and move this out of the way. I'm gonna take and have this in front of you guys so you can visualize this whole thing with me. For the first part, we just need this section. So what you do is you take your leftover squares and you go like this. And you could add some of these while we're here. Let's do two like this, and then we'll add one of these, and then do two more. These guys. That. One of these. And one more of these. And we're going to have some seam go missing as well with all this. So just remember that it may look too big, but we're also taking seam away. So here's this grouping. So I'm just going to stack them the way I want to sew them. Like that. Oops. So there's one side. And then we're just going to keep it right here so that we can lay out the next set. So I did two. So we are going to sew all these units together. and then we'll move on to how the rest of this goes. So let's go over to the sewing machine and sew them. Now I'm just gonna lift this up out of the way. We're gonna stick these right here so that I can sew all these groupings together. And let's go sew it. Now that these are together and they are pressed, what we're going to do is 2 of these are going to go on the opposite side of each other. So there are 2. We're going to move all this out of the way because the next step is, so we're separating those 2 and those 2. The next step is figuring out how it's going to land so that we can attach our corners. They're not going to be the same for everybody. So I'm not going to do this one because that starts and ends with what's right here. This is going to go here, and you can see there's going to be a seam allowance on each side. So what we're going to do is just leave that laying right there. I'm going to take one of these. It's just the one that I put together with the seam, and we're going to lay it as if it was binding, just like this. We're going to pretend that it was already binding, just for the moment. We're going to go from right here, which is the 1/4 inch seam. We're going to go to about right here, just like this. We're going to pretend that we're lifting it and folding it. And we're going to come down to right here, and that next side is going to land here. So what we want to do is, there's already a 1/4 inch here, and there's already a 1/4 inch here. What we're going to do is take this off right at that line that we just had our finger, right there. And I am going to go ahead and snip that away. This is now going to be the length of every single one of these, because all of these are the exact same size. See, they're exactly the same size. So what we're going to do is use this as our template. So we're going to go ahead and trim every single one of these. This is the one that's pieced. Usually I don't put a pieced bit right there in the corner, but the way my scraps landed on this quilt was different than the last one, which is kind of odd. All right, again, we're going to take these 2. They're perfectly lined up because this is the last 2, and these we're only taking about 1 inch off of, which is exactly what I did the last time. I didn't have my 1.5 yards must have been cut weird, because on the last one I landed that quilt, the yellow one landed with exactly 2 2.5 inch strips left. So this one was almost exact. So I was literally like a 1/4 inch too short. But that's okay because we had these pieces, and technically now this plus my little oddball strip and just a couple little pieces is all that is left. So if you actually accidentally made a boo-boo cut, you had plenty of your background left, but you do not have any of your charm squares left. This literally uses every last bit. So we're going to go ahead and take one of these, and hook it together. And then we're going to add one of these, so every other one. So next will be the one with the white, and then the next will be one of these, and then the next will be one of these, and then the last one will be one with the white. So I'm going to just tilt the camera so that you can watch me put this together, because it'd probably make it easier if I just tilt the camera so you can watch it and just leave it rolling so you can see how this goes together. So I'm gonna give you guys a quick pause. I don't film like this in every video, but I did want you to see every single step. So I'm gonna start by just a 1/4 inch seam. That's all we're doing, just a regular straight seam. And if you didn't want to do these piece borders, the quilt itself takes 5 2.5 inch strips to go all the way around. So that would mean you need 3.5 would end here. So you would need about 1 3/4 yards to have enough to get away from doing this. So I'm just gonna pick this up while it's still on here, and I'm gonna grab one of these with this, and I'm gonna put that on here, right sides together. Then I'm gonna go ahead and flip this, grabbing one of these, putting it right sides together on here, just like this. Flip it again, putting now one of these ones, just like this. And we're going to be pressing these seams all open. And then grab the end of this, right side up, grab this, right sides down. This is going to be exactly enough too, so you will have exactly enough. You might have to cut off maybe a 1/4 inch, but technically you will be right at the end, and all you have to do is hook them together when we put it on, which I will show you how to do that as well. This was already right side down, that's why it looked funny to me. So all of my pieces are together. We're going to go ahead, and I'm pretty sure everybody knows how to fold your binding in half and iron it. I'm going to skip that step and do that off camera, and then when the video resumes, it will be the next step, because this is going to take a few minutes extra, and you know, you've seen it a billion times. Just to line up properly, the next step is kind of weird. Now, I always put the binding on the back and then roll it to the front. With this project, we're going to do the exact same thing, but we are going to find an end like this, and I want my raw edge opening to stick out towards this direction. So I am going to line this raw edge up right here, just like this, between here and here. And this time we're going to take binding clips. So I'm going to use binding clips now. We're going to just say I want to start about right here, because I do want my hanging so that I can conjoin the two. And now I'm just going to carefully binding clip this on here upside down for the moment. And what I'm going to do now is we're going to flip the whole entire thing around, and I am going to go backwards. Now normally I wouldn't do this, but we want this to lay in a certain spot. So what we're going to do is come out. We're going to make sure that our binding is in the spot we want it. we're going to make our corner as if we were making it while we're binding, just like this. And I'm going to put a clip right here and a clip right here, and then we're going to turn the whole thing. Those clips should be holding everything in place. And now, once this is laying here, we're going to look and see where this is landing in case we need to adjust anything. So I want this to land about right here, a 1/4 inch away, just like this. So I told you if we needed to make any adjustments, we can do that. So if this one lands that way, we're going to adjust this again. Here. Right here. So now it goes up this way at a 45. And then comes down. It takes a second to do this. Come on, right there. All right. Just like that. Re-clip it. And then I'm going to see where it's landing again down here. It's not going to be perfect by no means because it adjusts while we're attaching it. So we're just going to willy-nilly put this on now, just like this. All the way around because we're starting from the opposite side either way. For now, I'm just kind of laying it in place as if it was being attached because the clips are going to come off. I just want to make sure that this is landing where I want it to land. So again, I'm going to look underneath and see, and this lands about where I want it. Again, everything will adjust when we start sewing it on. We're just getting that general idea of where it's going to land. And I'm constantly lifting it and going, oh, okay, that's going to land about right there. And it's not going to be exact at this very moment. We're just kind of giving it just a general pinning. And this is going to be my starting point. Like I said, everything's going to adjust. So for now, I'm just going to pin this in place, and I'm going to look right here at my final position. That looks pretty good. I did do a tag. All right, so here's going to be my first corner to come. So we're just going to give this a little pin, and I'm literally going to start right here, and as you can see, they come together right here at the end, leaving barely any room, but we only need a 1/4 inch. So right now it's sitting over about a 1/2 inch. We're going to start the stitching about right here, and everything should land because it's going to shift on the way down. It always shifts. So right now the pins are in it just temporarily. Kind of just the general idea of where we want it to land, and since it's a small project, it makes this easy to do. If you wanted to do this on a big project, I would consider laying it on the floor to accomplish that. Okay, here we go. We're going to start attaching our binding now with a 1/4 inch seam. I'm going to leave quite a bit of a tail, as much as I can, even though I'm starting at a corner. We're just going to remove that first clip. I'm going to put it about right here. So I have this much, but since we're only hooking the 2 ends together and we're not doing a diagonal seam, this doesn't have to be exact. So we're just going to go right here. I'm going to undo a couple of these because again, it's just holding it in place temporarily. All right, so I'm going to start stitching. back stitched at my beginning so that when I go to attach them that I don't have no pulling. We're going to come right here and I'm going to come a 1/4 inch away, pause it, I'm going to come up like this, make my 45-degree angle, just like this, making sure that it's all nice and aligned. Right here at the edge, I'm going to turn the whole entire thing, and at the moment I don't have the room to because the camera is in the way, but I'm going to come in on the end. We're going to turn this whole thing, keeping the most of it in my lap. We're just going to lay this on here and stitch down. I am stitching over my tag because I did add a tag. So I'm just lining it up. The binding clips are just kind of holding it in place, but you can see so they are kind of accurate. So you can see when I give it a nice tug, they're pretty much where they should be. So I'm just sewing it on. Kind of got skinny on my seam right there. All right, we're going to remove that. We're going to come to this corner and I try to get away all this extra messy threads that from the shifting. And again, I'm going to pull some of these clips off because I want to hang that, put this right here. I'm going to come a 1/4 inch away from the edge. Oh, I was not stitching for a while here. We're going to see why while we're here. No point in pausing. It just came undone, that's all. Put this in here. I don't know what's happening here. Machine issues. Okay, for some reason my bobbin is not fitting all of a sudden. Look at that. It won't go in. That is not a good thing. Don't know what's wrong. I will be back in a minute. Okay. It was just like not going in the hole. That was the weirdest thing. It happens sometimes, especially with this machine. It's the weirdest thing. Some bobbins fit perfectly fine and others just don't. But instead of using my thread cutter, which always gives me problems, we're just going to use it the opposite direction. So I'm going to now lift this up, create my 45, fold it down like this. We're going to slide this under and start stitching. I'm going to take this whole entire thing. Since you guys are like moving and in the way, I couldn't put the camera any other direction for you to see this. So again, I'm just going to start going down this side. And I'm just going to fast forward you through the rest. Connect the two ends. So right here seems flat enough to get the two together. So I'm just going to go ahead and do this right here. I literally am going to just nicely lay this out because I know it's going to shift. And I'm going to grab a pair of scissors. And I know my 1/4 inch. So what I'm going to do is from the end of this, I'm going to cut this over as straight as I can, 1/4 inch. So we're just gonna re-straighten it because I'm in a weird, awkward position here. Everything's nice and flat. There's room for shifting. We're going to cut this top one off about right here, just like that. So now all I need to do is take the two of these and put them, we're going to move the quilt out of the way, put this one down first, and then grab this and put this one down on top of it, right sides together in the normal way we would just piece anything else. No angle on this. We're just going to throw our 1/4 inch seam together right here. So I'm just going to hold this. You can throw pins in it, just hold it nice and tight if you don't use pins. We're going to sew our 1/4 inch seam. Readjust for a second and then continue on. And then we're going to open it up and go, oh, look at that. It landed right where we want. We're going to open this seam up. We got to use our fingers, open it up, and flatten it down and give it that crease. And then all we're going to do is line the quilt back up and continue stitching the rest of the way down. So everything is nice and flat. We didn't have to cut off a ton. Everything was lined up where we wanted it. And now we're just going to back stitch. And there it is now attached. And as you can see, they did not land exactly at the ends, and it's not going to because everything shifts. But it did land in a nice area so that all we have to do is flip this over now and stitch this on. So we're just going to turn the whole thing around and start stitching. So let me walk you through that, and I'm going to try to put the camera in a different angle. All right, so here we are. That way you can watch how this is done. I'm going to start at a corner and then I'll sew to another corner, and then we'll just fast forward it. That way you can see, but we can shorten the length of this video. So I'm going to fold it over. I'm going to put this on here about 1/8 of an inch away from the edge. To take that thread and put it under. I'm going to change my stitch length to about a 3.1, 3.1, somewhere in there. And now I'm going to go ahead and hold a distance away, but I'm going to adjust my fingers as we go. So I'm going to take a couple stitches. I'm going to stay along that edge. It's best if you hold your finger along it along this as you go. We're going to come to this corner and create a 45-degree. Then I'm going to flip that 45-degree angle onto the quilt itself, and you can see just ever so slightly off. So I'll just like fold it with my finger until it adjusts just right. So there we go. Now they meet at the corner. I'm going to use both of my fingers and go super slow. I take one stitch into it and one stitch out of it. Leave the needle down and turn it just like this, folding this down, and then I continue on down. So I start off slow till I can adjust the whole entire quilt onto my lap. It's best if it's on your lap. And we're just going to fold over. I use my fingers to kind of push along the edge so it brings the most of it forward. And I'm just going to go along that edge, just like this. And don't worry about these seams because it's going to be just the same as if you did a 45-degree seam, because see, they lay really flat. That is pretty darn flat. So don't worry about not having a bias seam because it really lays pretty darn flat. So we're just going to slowly go all the way down. Just do a little bit at a time. I fold it with what's on my tray. Stay along that edge. I go to my next finger and I fold it again. Staying along the edge. So if you ever want to do a pieced binding and you want those pieces to land in a certain area, it doesn't have to be exact, this is pretty much how you do it. You line it up before you even sew the pieces together, that way they land where you want them to. So you can see this pretty much is about almost a 1/4 inch off. It's not that bad. but it landed pretty much where I wanted it to. So I'm just going to keep sewing nice and slow along that edge. And if you have any, you know, shredding is what I call it, because the fabric all shreds. No, fabric doesn't shred. All fabric shreds. I don't care what it is. I'm just going to slowly fold that over. You can see how I use my fingers along it to hold it folded nicely. We're going to come to this corner again. We're going to start by folding it over. Use my finger under there first. I'm going to come to this edge and just hold that. Everything is nicely over. The closer I get, the easier it is. So I'm going to just finger press this down, lift the whole thing, and flip it over. And that one landed great right at the first shot for a 45-degree miter. So we're going to come right up to it, take one stitch in, one stitch out, one stitch in, and turn. So, and then I just take a couple stitches away, and notice my seam that I made from those two fabrics landed right here instead of in the corner, because I cut it off a certain way, or else it would have landed in the corner if I would have left it full like that, which worked perfect. Right here in the edge. And then we're just going to go ahead and fast forward through the rest. Folks, look at this. Isn't that a beauty? I love it. This one turned out 51 by 51, which is just 1 inch shorter than the other one, but I think it has to do with the way I quilted it. Again, the other one is 52 by 52, and that one's a lot more densely quilted, so maybe it pushed it out a little bit. This one's not as densely quilted, so it kind of just shrunk up with that batting, and it'll shrink again and probably in the wash and, you know, be 50 by 50 after it's washed. But as you can see, that pieced binding, like I said, you can add that to any quilt, But you can see it landed here to here. If you look up here, it landed right on point. This one's about a 1/4 inch over, and there's no way to have this perfect. But this is pretty much how it's done. So it pretty much lands where it needs to. You can see the difference in color if you remember the beginning quilt, but I'll show you again. And then here is the back. Oh, let's get some threads off of there. So the back is just a blueprint with little tiny circle flowers, like they're just little circles that create a flower. As you can see, quite the difference. Let me just hold this about exactly where the other one is. The difference between the colors. So color also has something to do with how you want your quilt to show. This one says bold, look at me. This one is more subtle and calming, and it's relaxing with the off-white creamish color as its backing fabric and the less pronounced fabric. But this one with the bright yellow along with the darker fabrics, although there is some light ones in here, those darker fabrics really make it pop. So you either have bold or subtle, and I personally like the subtle. But let me know what you think in the comments below. So if you think that this is something you would want to make, comment below that you're going to make it. And if you do, please share it in the Facebook group or share on Instagram with the hashtag tiffanysquiltinglife, all one word. And I want to see what you guys make. So thank you for watching. If you're new to my channel, please subscribe, like my videos, and share them with your quilty friends. And I'll see you next video. Bye, everyone.